Yes, indeed. It is called Lothric, where the transitory lands of the Lords of Cinder converge. In venturing north, the pilgrims discover the truth of the old words. The fire fades, and the lords go without thrones. Only in truth, the lords will abandon their thrones. And the unkindled will rise. Nameless, accursed undead, unfit even to be cinder. And so it is that ash seeketh embers.
I leave Sisyphus at the foot of the mountain, when always finds one's burdens again. But Sisyphus teaches the higher fidelity that negates the gods and raises rocks. He too concludes that all is well. This universe, henceforth, without a master, seems to him neither sterile nor futile. Each atom of that stone, each mineral flake of that night-filled mountain, in itself forms a world. The struggle itself towards the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. This quote by Camus discussing the myth of Sisyphus is something that I read months ago that changed my perception of struggle. It's something I read while going through struggles in my personal life that felt pointless, something that stuck with me for the entirety of this project. It's something I wish to memorialize in the start of this video essay, and something that I want you to keep in your heart, if you forget every other word I say. When I first started this assignment, I had no idea of the philosophical adventure I would partake in. I delved into the deepest trenches of nihilism and emerged a better person, with newfound knowledge and perspective. I learned to abandon who I was to become a better version of myself. It's a concept rooted in many cultures, harboring many different definitions and importances. The one I mainly refer to when discussing this is Japan's phenomenon of ego death. Killing, for lack of a better word, a part of yourself to allow for your inner person to grow. This is something I resonated with throughout this entire assignment. And I had to shed all pretenses of what I thought was important or what I thought was necessary for a society or an individual to function. When referring to nihilism, it is important to understand its actual purpose in one's psyche, that being a stepping stone to the next better idea. It's a liminal mindset that helps transition you to a more stable version, one that is based solely on the individual and what is important to them. When referring to nihilism in any context, it's impossible to do so without talking about the godfather of these existentialist ideas, Friedrich Nietzsche. Friedrich and his ideas helped propel nihilism and its teachings to millions of people and hundreds of societies across the world. His teachings focused primarily on helping enhance societies and individuals through a philosophical shedding of sorts. A quote of his apt to this would be, "For when you gaze long into the abyss gazes also into you." Nietzsche believed through this action, if societies were to arise from these ashes of destroyed foundation, attacking religion, beliefs, and even customs, it would arise stronger from these ashes, more stable than through the preconceived notions it founded itself on. That is to say, nihilism itself, despite its dark and winding path, eventually leads to the betterment of the individual and the society, through hardship and struggle, through time and purpose. However, there are dark paths that can be taken and dwelt far down when discussing such harrowing crises of not only identity, but also purpose. When beating these hurdles set forth to us as a species, what can be created is an indomitable will that can stand the test of time. We can create a society, as Nietzsche states, of Dark Souls is a series spanning many years, and in all those years, it has carefully and beautifully constructed a narrative that accentuates and brings to light what a civilization looks like when it is tired. It demonstrates what happens when the very threads that hold this woven world together are snapped and the very fabric of reality is torn at the seams. It's a series that I entered late, with the release of Elden Ring, around the start of the 2020s. But it's still a great game that I hold dear to my heart. However, the story of Dark Souls is not a triumphant one. It's not one laden with gold or with the victories of a vigorous society, but one where the dark path was walked down far too deep. What happens to a society when it's not possible to persist? What happens when the blight that infects it permeates it to its core? What happens when all you can do is move on? At the beginning, before the Age of Fire, there was the Age of Nothing. No life, no progress, no time, just the dragons. Life was stagnant as the dragons ruled over a world that was timeless. However, deep below the ground, humanity would be born in the cauldron of life itself, rising as husks. These husks would be imbued with humanity, giving structure, and they would rise to be lords. The most prominent being Gwyn, who led humanity's assault against the dragons through the power of lightning, garnered through a dragon's betrayal. This long war ended in the victory of humanity and the sputtering of the roaring Age of Fire. This fire persisted through hundreds of years, bringing prosperity and power to humanity as they ruled the lands far and between. However, no age lasts forever, and all eventually deteriorates under the passage of time. This came in the fading of the flame, a symbol that the Age of Fire was coming to a close. Gwyn, however, saw this weakening as a challenge and spurred together his strongest knights, and with them marched into the flame to serve as kindling and to extend the Age of Fire. These events of the age's strongest warriors coming together to commit a selfless sacrifice to extend the flame carried on for hundreds of years, forcing an age to persist long after its due time. These sacrifices would soon come to not be enough, however, as every time the flame sputtered back to life, it reemerged quieter and quieter. It provided an interesting view on what a phoenix would rise from, when even the ashes themselves held no continuity. With this concept, the playing field is set for the story of Dark Souls 3, a story of moving on. Something that inspired me to discuss this topic to the extent of creating an entire video essay over it was how Dark Souls and its society viewed the plaguing concept of death. When the Age of Fire persisted itself, it forced humanity to walk the lands through an undead curse. It forced humanity to stare into the abyss. In the context of Dark Souls, hollowing is an action that refers to a zombification of one's will. Hollowing is the personified answer to the question regarding what one would do if they had nothing to fight for. Those who walk this land with their humanity intact, therefore, are those who have simply not yet experienced the cold cusp of death enough to lose the ambition, or those with goals and resolve so steeled they persist despite their constant demise. Even the player is not protected from such a fate, as it can be theorized. Someone leaving the game or quitting upon reaching a difficult point has therefore hollowed and rotted away at the core. The player themselves is painted as yet another undead, referred by many non-playable characters throughout the world as unfit to even be kindling. With this, we reach you, the player, the chosen undead fated to save the Age of Fire and perpetuate it for the coming years. You are the one slated to burn bright as kindling as the dozens and dozens before you and after you. For the truth of the matter is, you are not special, you are not unique. You are but another piece of ash, revived in a desperate attempt to keep the fire alive. But why does this world seem so desperate to call someone as unnotable as a meager human a savior? Someone fit to stand next to gods and champions of this dying world. You encounter many hollows on your adventures, husks of humanesque figures that trudge their feet across the land, unaware of even their own purpose in this world. These figures are you, the player. They are all you, and vice versa, humans. The only thing that separates you, however, is purpose. The purpose and goal to push for. The reason to live. This, I believe, reflects the proper digestion of nihilism and all the aspects that make it up, which is the very purpose of this video essay that I wish to discuss with you, the viewer. Purpose. Purpose is a fickle thing that I struggled to grasp for weeks during this assignment. Purpose is something nihilism revolves around in its entirety, for it is a philosophy that denies any purpose that is brought forth by society, for one that is fueled by one's personal perception of what is important. That is what Dark Souls is, and its concept of hollowing revolves around you. You, the player, do not fall victim to the fate of hollowing, however. This is due to you having a major goal from even before the game begins. That goal is to link the flame, burning yourself to persist the age for years to come. Throughout the lands you travel, you will encounter large enemies, known as bosses, that will do everything in their power to defeat you in combat. These bosses are extremely difficult and often take many lives to defeat, which is where nihilism and cyclical time shine their brightest in the game. As players, and the characters they inhabit will go one of two ways. They'll stick around to their resolve and their purpose, overcoming the concept of hollowing itself, beating this grand foe, and moving on to the next challenge. Another way, however, is through the repeated battering and dissolving of their will. They will concede, giving up their purpose, and hollowing. The player quitting and uninstalling the game will, in a way, represent the will of their character leaving, consigning their character to the horrid fate of hollowing. Since the players abandoned their mission, they and their character no longer had a purpose to push on through the challenge for one reason or another. They had no personal goal to attach to, nothing left to fight for. When you perish, your body isn't ejected before the killing blow. No. You die and experience a gruesome death. Stabbing, electrocution, crushing, bleeding out, or being purged, your character experiences all of it, and so does every other NPC, hollowed and normal, that you meet. This is what makes people lose their faith in their path, and resign to hollowing so quickly. Experiencing the crushing sensation of death, only to be thrusted back to your peak condition, is something no human is designed to ever experience. The madness of the unknown and the pain of it causes insanity to set in. This is what Friedrich Nietzsche warned heavily about in his writings. When a person experiences the maddening realization of a cruel world that does not care for their presence, it causes a loss of a will to live, a loss of purpose. If you and your player character find it in your heart to push past this pain of constant loss and defeat, you find strengthened resolve, and in this resolve, you save yourself from the fate of your predecessors and colleagues, a fate far worse than death itself, that would tear and chip away at their very souls. This chipping and tearing, despite what you may think, can easily happen to you. The wearing away of one's will results in the player character experiencing almost a canonical death, as the human controlling them gives up entirely on the world, letting it rot and decay without their input. However, for the sake of argument, and this video, we can safely assume that because you paid the $60 price tag that you'd want to see this game through to the end. So, pushing on past the first boss that you fight, you enter a strange and oddly welcoming place full of helpful NPCs who all have their views on the current state of the world.
Ah, another one roused from the sleep of death. Well, you're not alone. We unkindled are worthless. Can't even die right. Gives me conniptions. And they'd have us seek the lords of Cinder and return them to their moulding thrones. But we're talking true legends with the metal to link the fire. We're not fit to lick their boots. Don't you think?
This is what makes the game so special to me, so fantastic and unique. Because when you look beyond the surface, you see a world so devoid of love and enjoyment, so rich with agony and despair, it makes you, the player, ask the same question. Why bother? The nihilistic connection between you and this world is established, and it is something you experience time and time again throughout your journey. It's an internal conflict within yourself, beyond any graphical presentation. It refers back to what I discussed earlier, the need for a why. A why to carry in your soul, a why to push on despite the difficulties, a why to overcome anyhow. When you have a why, hollowing becomes impossible, both in the game and in real life. To hollow in real life is to live day by day, marching to and from your daily activities without thinking, waking up, eating, working, and sleeping ad infinitum. This is what hollowing represents, not a disruption or destruction of one's physical form beyond repair, but rather an utter mental defeat. When one surrenders to the nihility of their world, they are no better than the wandering husks that inhabit it. When discussing Dark Souls, it's impossible to do that without discussing its grand architecture. The castle of Lothric is laden with destroyed battlements and rotting wood, with death and decay permeating every alley of this dying civilization. Great enemies roam these lands, large and foreboding, and who have no quarrel with murdering you at a moment's notice. They are strewn throughout the painted halls, shambling in their old armor, waiting for their next challenge, either to be put out of their misery or to end this terrible age once and for all. Nihility creeps into every aspect of this game. As you roam the halls, your feet crushing skulls of fallen comrades as you push past castle walls uninhabited by any authority. The only thing that remains is the shambling, hollowed corpses of men that have long since fallen to the purposeless suffering of their surroundings. The architecture of Dark Souls has always been something that has interested me to my core, its medieval halls juxtaposing the horrendous monsters that shamble through it, the men of once great stature defending halls filled with rotten food and decaying bodies. To bring it back to a previous point, let's talk a bit more about the bosses of Dark Souls 3. Now, I won't go into all of them, since we'd be here all day, but all in all, Every single boss has a theme. That theme is both decay and nihility itself. From the smallest and nimblest to the hulking giants, every boss has come to reject the Age of Fire. Except one who eagerly waits for you to bring the others to their thrones, so they may all burn together. Every boss is here for the express goal of denying the Age of Fire any more continuity, for one reason or another. The ones that you need to bring back to burn are the most interesting to discuss. They are all champions that had been burned before, resurrected by the curse of this land that makes men go hollow. The Undead Curse. Yorm the Giant is the one that I wish to discuss in this video essay, as they are the one that represents nihility and its dangerous effects, and are, in that turn, the most understandable to the player. Yorm the Giant was one of the many champions who had burned themselves in the past to extend the Age of Fire. However, upon being resurrected to repeat this action, they looked around, noticing their actions had no great effect on the world, and if anything, had caused more suffering in the end. Through this, a great depression and nihility befell this giant, causing him to idle on his empty throne, with a sword beside him. This sword being the only thing in the world able to fell this giant. What I wish for you to take away from this discussion of the giant would be that even the greatest and strongest beings of this land have fallen to the idleness of nihility. They have fallen to the decay and death of this world, and have lost all purpose and reason to continue. Yorm, through the hollowing, the architecture, and the bosses themselves that seem tired, it all adds up to the ending of Dark Souls 3. The ending of Dark Souls has you fighting the Age itself. The Soul of Cinder is the very culmination of every single champion that came before, that eradicated themselves before the flame to embolden it for years to come. The final boss is the ultimate analogy for nihilism, the shore that civilizations break themselves upon, a marker of a dying age. The final boss of Dark Souls 3 is the culmination of everything that is wrong with the Age of Fire. It is every mistake of it personified into one being. It is emboldened and created from the souls of sacrificed champions, harboring their skills and powers all the same. And it harbors the fatal flaw that encompasses this dying world. The inability to let go, to move on, to face the unknown, to jump headfirst into that nihilistic pool and embrace it for the change that it brings. It towers over the player with a dark sky behind it, the land around you converging itself into one point, a symbolic gesture that this age is truly at its last push, and that time itself seems to be cycling into a new age, whether the participants of this age want it or not. Dark Souls 3 ends in a truly symbolic gesture, showing the player that everything they fought for is dissipating before their very eyes, and everyone they met along their journey are now being forced into this new era. You exchange blows, fight, and eventually overpower the Soul of Cinder itself, defeating the fire and leaving it to your whim. It bolsters into a fiery explosion, leaving a meek bonfire in the center of the arena. And so you bring forth the souls of the champions of old to this dying fire and thrust the kindling into it by force. However, when you do so, there is no triumphant explosion of fire, no narrative indication that you saved anything. Then it leaves you with the stark realization, nothing that you did saved anything. Nothing you did stopped the impending age from coming. And so you sit there, the fire pathetically and slowly whittling you away, barely able to ignite itself on the ashes of the champions you brought as kindling. The fire that burned this age into existence is now barely sustaining itself off the embers of your rotten body, withered and weak beyond any sustenance. This is what Dark Souls 3 was about, reflected through this bitter ending. It was about realizing that nothing you did mattered, only what mattered to you mattered. The fire was lit, and the age shall continue for a few years at most, and the next champion will fight an ever stronger Soul of Cinder, having absorbed your power now. This would persist until the Soul of Cinder would render itself undefeatable. And with this realization, it reflects the narrative purpose of Dark Souls 3 and the entire trilogy, embedding it into the player itself. Dark Souls 3 was about shedding the familiar ashes for the fires and new opportunities of the unknown. It was about realizing that purpose came from within. It was about shedding the narratives and truth forced onto us by societies, religions, and other people in our lives. It was to find purpose within ourselves, to carry us through any era. Dark Souls 3 was about letting go.